Now, a lot of times out here on these fields in Gettysburg, a lot of people talk about big stories. People like Dan Sickles having his leg lopped off by a cannonball, or larger stories about love like Jenny Wade here at Gettysburg. Those are individual stories that play a big role at this place. But today I'm here for the unknown stories, the smaller stories, the ones that aren't told very often out here on these fields. It's the individual stories of the soldiers that fought out here and some that died out here. And that's what we're here for today. We're going to tell you one of those stories here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And just off in the field behind me here, you can kind of make out the Sherfy farm, the peach orchard, where that crazy fight took place out here on the 2nd day of July at the peach orchard, moving on over to the wheat field and the round tops. Across these fields here, the 13th Mississippi and General Barksdale came charging, and they pushed the Federals off of the peach orchard and moved them almost a mile back towards their own lines. For them, there was a moment in time when Gettysburg looked like it was going to be a victorious thing. And for Sergeant Reagan out here with the 13th Mississippi, who had been with them since the beginning, since they were a militia, he was probably excited, but also scared at the same time, because this was some of the hardest combat that they'd seen so far in the war. It wouldn't end so positively for him or General Barksdale. Needless to say, Dan Sickles brought on the fight out here by being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, in a previous video, we talked about a Union soldier that was out here and was propped up against these rocks that we're about to pass, and his back against a rock, and he was watching the Mississippians rush right past him in a flurry of activity, because they were trying to get to the cannons and they were trying to turn them, and they were pushing everybody back towards Cemetery Ridge. And he's laying here not knowing whether or not he's going to be taken captive or possibly even be killed just laying there against that rock. Well, somewhere out here in these fields, something similar happened to Newton Reagan. Now, Newton Reagan was a sergeant and he was with the militia in Mississippi. And he was in Choctaw County, and he was a farmer at the time that he decided to join the militia at the start of the war. Newton, based on the photograph that we have of him, was probably carrying an officer's sword in the militia, which means he's in the position of authority even in the militia. And then you fast forward to when they join the Confederacy, and he's a sergeant, so we know his position of rank when he fights out here. The militia he joins is called the Winston Guard. That militia ends up in the 13th Mississippi. The leader of that 13th Mississippi is none other than Brigadier General William Barksdale, the fire eater and politician that right to the bitter end was cursing and yelling at all the people around him, telling them that the South still had something for them. Well, that Mississippi brigade that came across this field certainly had something for their enemy when they led out across the field, rushing towards Cemetery Ridge and driving the Union soldiers back. But they got so caught up in the moment that when they drove them back, they didn't realize that they were not very well supported across the field. The attack wasn't coordinated properly, and so on their right flank, the men were caught up in the wheat field and weren't successful like they were hoping for. And on their left flank, the fight that was closer to the center of the action wasn't as successful as they were hoping for. And over on Culp's Hill, the fight was vicious, and it wasn't as successful as they were hoping for. So right here at the Peach Orchard, this is really the pinnacle, the high water mark of the fighting that day, of all of the successes that happened. And Winston Reagan, or Newton Reagan, is here, and he is a part of this. He is the one that's out here on these fields, rushing across the open grounds in front of us here. Something else. Now, Newton Reagan's no chump when it comes to a battle. Him and his unit have been involved in a lot of fighting since the beginning. He was at Ball's Bluff, First Bull Run. He gets wounded at one point and ends up missing out on the Antietam campaign because of it. But by the end of the year, he's healed up and ready to go, and he's back in action just in time for Fredericksburg. He also ends up fighting at Malvern Hill. Now, Malvern Hill has a lot of the same similarities for the fighting and the charging and all that stuff, so he's seen this before. He knows what it looks like. and unfolds again here at Gettysburg. Now, as Newton's trying to make his way back across this field here, by the end of the day, when things aren't going in his favor, when Mississippi has to fall back, he's not able to go back with them. As a result, people like William Barksdale, who's wounded, and others, and Newton, who's out here on this field, are taken captive, and Newton's processed and sent up to Fort Delaware. And he becomes a prisoner of war there until he takes the oath of allegiance in June of 1865. Newton would live to see another day, however, and he ends up moving on with his life, having a family, 4 children, and he dies in 1906 at the ripe old age of 69. For Newton, Gettysburg was a highlight in his life and the end of the fighting in the Civil War for him. But he would also fight for his life while he was at Fort Delaware, because as a prisoner of war, it didn't matter which side you were on. When you went into a POW camp, you were likely to die of disease or starvation, no matter which side. And he survived that. And that's another story here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Well, Gettysburg is full of stories like that. Individual soldiers with their lives, their families, the things they left behind, and then the things they go on to do in the future if they survive it. Hope you enjoyed what we brought to you out here at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I hope you learned a little something about an individual soldier and his journey to Gettysburg. Until next time, this is History with Waffles.